trying to get support for a great idea can sometimes feel like explaining, I don't know, a really complex machine, right? You know how it works perfectly,
Wow.
but getting someone else to see it, especially when, resources or funding are on the line, that feels like a huge task.
Yeah.
How do you make sure they really get it without getting lost?
Yeah, that's a super common challenge, whether it's for um, funding or ethical approval or even just getting your team on board. You need a really clear, structured way to lay it all out. You've
Yeah.
got to cut through the noise, basically, and show not just what you want to do, but why it's actually important and, crucially, how you're going to pull it off.
Exactly. And that is precisely our mission today. We've got this source document here. It really gets into the nitty-gritty of writing a research proposal.
Mhm.
So our deep dive is going to unpack this, pull out the key pieces, the why behind each section. The idea is to give you that kind of essential blueprint, simplify the whole thing so you know what makes a proposal really strong.
Yeah, we'll zero in on the key takeaways from the source, helping you understand the structure, sure, but also the kind of strategic thinking that goes into building that compelling case for your idea.
Right, because it's not just filling out a form, is it? It's building an argument, a roadmap.
Yeah.
Almost like a promise. Okay, let's unpack this. So starting right at the beginning, why even write one of these detailed proposals?
Well, the source is very direct about this. The main point of a well-put-together research proposal is simple. Is to get the resources you need to actually do the project.
So money, support, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Think of it as the key document funding agencies look at to decide, is this idea worth our investment?
Okay.
But it's also critical for the ethics side of things. The ethics committee needs that detailed plan to check if your research protects participants properly and is, well, ethically sound. So you're talking to at least two vital audiences.
That makes a lot of sense. Two birds, one stone, kind of. And the source mentions some agencies have like a two-step process.
They do, yeah. Sometimes you start with maybe a shorter plan, a letter of intent.
A pre-proposal.
Sort of, yeah. And if that gets the green light, then you submit the full detailed version. And the source also points out something really practical. Often, these funding agencies give you their own application kits or specific formats to follow.
Ah, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel usually?
Right, but you absolutely do need to follow their specific guidelines. Dot the I's, cross the T's on their template.
Key point.
Yeah.
Follow the template. Okay, so right after the intro, the source jumps into something called the synopsis. What's that about? Why is it right up front?
The synopsis is basically your elevator pitch
Yeah.
for the whole project. It's a summarized overview right at the beginning, designed to give the reviewer a quick snapshot of the entire plan.
Quick snapshot. How quick?
Well, the source gives a pretty strict limit here. It should not be more than one full page.
Wow, one page for the whole project. That definitely forces you to be concise. What absolutely has to be in there, according to the source?
It lists the must-haves, your studying objectives, the key details about your sample, who and how many of the methods you'll use, how long the study will take, and, importantly, how you'll evaluate the outcomes.
Okay, so objectives, sample, methods, duration, evaluation, all the big hitters.
Exactly. It's the executive summary you get someone to just immediately.
Got it. Synopsis, quick pitch. Then the source moves to background to the problem. This sounds foundational. What's the goal here?
This is where you really set the stage. You need to show the reader what we already know about this topic and what research has, already been done in this specific area.
Proving you've done your homework, basically.
It's a bit more than just homework. The source really emphasizes describing your literature search strategy. It's the results of that search that form the foundation for justifying why your study is needed.
Ah, so it shows the gap, the thing that's missing that your study will fill.
Precisely. It builds the argument for why your study is significant, and it clearly shows how your work is going to add something new. What's fascinating here, I think, is how this section isn't just listing facts. It's crafting a narrative.
A story.
Kind of. A logical story that leads the reader from the bigger picture right down to the specific problem your research tackles.
So it makes your research question feel like the obvious next step. I like that the source mentions not all research creates a product right away, but can be like a little brick in the building of something bigger. That feels very real for science.
It's a really important point. It validates that incremental progress. Now, there's a practical warning in this section, too, from the source. Avoid making your problem sound too big or unmanageably complex.
Don't bite off more than you can chew.
Exactly. Or critically unethical to investigate in just one study. Keep it focused and doable.
Makes sense. Anything else for the background?
Yeah, if it applies, you should bring in relevant theory here. Put your study in a broader theoretical context.
Yeah.
And if you can, based on what's already known, the source suggests including explicit predictions. Hypotheses, basically.
Saying what you expect to find. Okay. Building on that, the next bit is significance of the problem. This is where you sell why it matters, right, to people other than you.
Absolutely. This is your connection to the bigger picture. The source is clear. You have to describe how your research contributes to what we already know, and this is key why that contribution is important.
And funding bodies, they have their own priorities, I guess.
They definitely do. The source points out they're interested in pushing knowledge forward in specific areas that align with their mission. So your proposal needs to show that alignment, not just, your own curiosity.
Okay, so besides just saying it's important, what specific things should you highlight here? What does the source say?
It lists a few key things. Expected generalizability, like how widely can your findings be applied?
Beyond just your study group.
Right. How it contributes to theory.
Mm.
Any possible practical applications or consequences. And especially given the source's original context, how it could improve practice, like nursing practice or patient care.
Generalizability, theory, application, practice, impact. Got it. Those are concrete. Then objectives seems simple, but any nuances?
Clarity and simplicity are huge here. The source says objectives should be kept short and clear. And the benefit. Clear objectives give you unambiguous benchmarks to assess the research against.
They define success.
Pretty
Right.
much. The course also notes that having a specific research hypothesis, or maybe a model you're testing, is often better, because you can usually define a hypothesis as true or false. Very clear outcome.
And what about the things you're actually measuring?
Your outcome variables. Yeah,
Yeah.
they need to be clearly defined, primary outcomes, secondary outcomes.
Mhm.
And obviously they have to be appropriate measures for what you're actually trying to study.
Define success. Define how you measure it. Got it. Source has another warning here, too.
Yes, a common pitfall, apparently. Making your objectives too complicated or just having too many of them. It can actually mean you end up achieving no clear results at all.
Keep it focused. Keep it manageable. What if it's more exploratory research, not testing a specific hypothesis?
Source covers that too. For exploratory or descriptive work, it says objectives often work best phrased simply as answerable questions.
Which leads us perfectly to the next section. Research questions. How do these fit with the objectives?
They really guide the investigation. They help the reader see exactly which variables you're going to be measuring or looking at.
And the source has two main criteria for these questions.
Yep. First, they have to be relevant. They need to logically follow from your introduction and the objectives you just laid out.
Makes sense.
Second, they must be researchable. You have to be able to actually answer them using the methods you're proposing. If you can't realistically answer it with your plan, it's not a good question for this proposal.
Relevance and researchability. Check. And they need to add something new.
Oh, absolutely. The source stresses that good research questions have to contribute something new to the knowledge base. It also mentions that really thinking through different potential questions during planning is smart. Saves time, saves money later.
Ensures it's feasible.
Exactly. Helps make sure the study is sustainable with the resources and time you have.
Good planning up front saves headaches later. Okay, now the big one probably. Methods. The how-to guide.
It really is. The source says your explanation here needs to be sufficiently thorough so the reader has no doubt about how you'll tackle your research objectives. And a really critical point, you must include the rationale. Why this method?
Justify your choices, don't just list steps. Okay, let's break down the key things the source says need to be in methods, starting with the overall design.
Right. Describe the study design. Is it descriptive? Cross-sectional, just a snapshot in time, longitude of following people over time, or a randomized controlled trial in RCT.
And who's in the study? Participants.
Yep. Detail your sampling plan, how you'll find them, and the specific number you need. And the source is quite specific here. That number needs a statistical justification.
You need to show why that number is right.
Precisely. Show the calculation or the reasoning that proves this sample size is enough to actually detect meaningful results, if they exist. And if you're randomizing, describe how you'll do that.
Statistical justification avoids wasting resources or having a study too small to find anything.
Exactly right. And for experimental designs, you need to include a statistical power analysis. This basically confirms your sample size is big enough to detect a real difference or relationship.
So you don't miss something important just because your study was underpowered. What about the tools you'll use? Questionnaires, equipment?
Describe all your instruments. questionnaires, specific procedures, any special equipment. And the source notes something practical. Copies of things like questionnaires should actually be attached to the proposal.
Makes sense for them to see the actual tools. What about handling the data afterwards?
Describe how you'll collect the data. And, just as important, your analysis strategy. How will you manage it? How will you make sense of it all?
And planning for hiccups. Things going wrong.
The source advises including potential problems you foresee with your methods. And this is key. Your strategies for dealing with them if they pop up. Shows you've thought ahead.
Anticipating challenges shows you're prepared. Good point.
And finally, to keep things on track, the source suggests describing your monitoring process. How will you oversee the project and make sure it follows the plan?
Okay, methods is huge. Design, participants, sample size justification, power analysis, tools, data handling, problem solving, monitoring. It's the proof of a solid plan, which leads nicely into ethical awareness.
Yeah, this is absolutely crucial, non-negotiable. The source emphasizes participant integrity, patient or volunteer, must be protected at all times.
So explain potential ethical issues and how you'll handle them.
Exactly. Describe any ethical implications and precisely how you'll manage them. The source mentions established guidelines like the Declaration of Helsinki. A core principle is that risk to the participant cannot outweigh the potential benefits.
Balancing risks and benefits, and participation must be voluntary.
Completely voluntary,
Yeah.
and based on informed consent. That means people agree only after getting clear, detailed written info about the study, the good and the potentially bad for them. You have to describe how you'll give them this info and how you'll get their consent.
The whole consent process needs to be spelled out.
Right. The source also adds, if there's any risk of injury from procedures, mention insurance coverage. And practically attach copies of your ethics application, the patient information sheet, and the consent form.
Attaching the documents proves you've done the work. Okay, after ethics, we've got time frame, mapping out the schedule.
The source kind of chuckles here, saying there never seems to be sufficient time in research.
True enough.
But defining a time frame is essential for managing the project.
Forces realism, step-by-step planning.
Exactly. You need a realistic deadline for the whole thing, but also break it down. Include deadlines for key milestones, submitting to ethics, finishing data collection, getting the final report done.
Build in buffer time too, I assume.
Definitely. The source explicitly says allow for delays, like ethics asking for changes. And a clear timetable helps the funders too. They assess the value for money against your timing. Does your completion date work for them?
Timeline helps funders judge feasibility and relevance. Okay, who's doing the work? Study personnel.
This is all about showing your team has the right skills and experience, the necessary scientific chops and research track record to pull off this specific study.
Proving you've got the A-team.
Pretty much. Describe the mix of researchers, highlight relevant experience, especially with the methods you chose, and clearly state who's doing what, each person's contribution to different parts.
Career roles.
And if you have specific ways you'll communicate, like a project website or regular calls, mention that if it's relevant. The source stresses the team's suitability is a major factor in evaluation.
Team competence is definitely under the microscope. What about physical stuff? Equipment, labs, that's facilities.
This is fairly straightforward. Document that you have access to any specialist facilities or equipment your research needs.
Like what?
Source gives examples. Physiological instruments, libraries, computers, data processing gear, special records, labs, even a dedicated website if needed.
Any specific tools or places required?
Exactly. The goal is just to reassure sponsors you have the logistics covered. You should also mention if your institution is backing you with space, equipment, services, data access, admin support, that kind of thing.
Institutional support helps.
Okay, finally, the one everyone waits for, budget. How do you justify the cost according to the source?
Core principle. Funding requested must be justifiable based on the knowledge you expect to gain.
Value for money. Got it.
Yeah. And it's judged against the type of application, long-term project, short pilot study, just planning time. You need a detailed cost breakdown.
What kinds of costs does the source mention? It lists quite a few. Consumables, software, postage, staff time, equipment, renting space, maybe reimbursing participants.
Paying them for their time.
Or expenses, yeah. Costs for medical tests, lab analysis, time for data analysis and presentation like travel or conference fees, application fees. It's comprehensive.
Covers a lot, and there was that specific example.
Oh yeah, the breakfast. If your study needs participants to fast, like in diabetes research, budget for giving them a nice breakfast afterwards. include that cost.
I love that. Shows you're thinking about the people involved. And then the institution adds its cut.
Yep, institutional overhead.
Yeah.
The source gives an old 2005 example of 54.5%. The point is, you need to know your current institutional rate and add it on top.
Check current policy. How should the budget look?
Presented clearly, separate sheet, usually a table. And an interesting point the source makes. If you struggle to detail the costs, it might mean your overall plan isn't quite baked yet.
A fuzzy budget could signal a fuzzy plan. That's smart.
Yeah. And the source briefly mentioned the funding climate back then, favoring larger, multi-professional studies. Just a reminder that external factors matter too.
Right. So we've covered all the sections. What about the conclusion of the proposal document itself? How does the source frame that?
It describes the proposal really nicely as a way of opening communication between researchers and the people interested, funders, advisors, review boards.
The start of a dialogue based on the plan.
Exactly. And it introduces this powerful idea of an accepted proposal being a two-way contract.
A contract? How so?
The funders or reviewers are essentially saying, okay, we'll offer support money, approval, if you do the research exactly as you've laid it out here. And the researchers are agreeing, if you give us that support, we will conduct the project exactly as proposed.
Wow, that puts a lot of weight on the document. A mutual commitment.
It really does. Changes how you think about it. The source also gives final tips on presentation. Make it look good, neat and pleasing appearance. It suggests care went into it.
Professionalism signals care.
And clarity is vital. Write clearly, because committees have diverse members, not all experts in your tiny niche. Avoid jargon or explain it well.
Right for a smart generalist audience. Any final softer advice?
Yeah, a nice point about future opportunities. If you get funded, remember to say thanks. Afterwards, send the agency a copy of the final report and acknowledge their support in any publications.
Ah, good practice.
The source literally says this might increase the opportunity for a successful application for the next study.
Building goodwill pays off. That's practical.
Indeed.
Phew. Okay, that was a really thorough deep dive into structuring a research proposal based on this source. It's clearly way more than just listing tasks. It's about building this solid, justified, well-presented argument.
Absolutely. A strong proposal is, at its heart, a clear, logical case backed by a detailed, feasible, and ethical plan. It forces you to think hard about why it's needed, how you can actually do it, and why your team and resources are the right ones for the job.
And really understanding these pieces section by section, it does demystify it quite a bit. Whether you're writing one or maybe evaluating one or even just planning any complex project, seeing this structure helps you get the why behind each part.
You know, this deep dive really underscores that a proposal isn't just some document. It's, as we discussed, a promise. It's kind of a contract built on shared understanding and clarity. It makes you wonder, how does framing communication like that, like building a contract, maybe change how you approach presenting your own ideas, big or small, to other people?
That's a really interesting way to think about it. Something to chew on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
My pleasure. Always interesting stuff.
We hope this breakdown helps you navigate your own proposals and projects with a bit more confidence.